Ever since 1x drivetrains became the thing, it has become widely known that backpedaling on certain gears, especially the low ones, can cause the chain to derail. For me, the odd thing was that there were always problems with backpedaling, especially on certain gears or configurations. Maybe they were just less annoying, maybe. Anyway, one of those problems is something which I call a cassette backlash. It also happens when you backpedal. It also can be a source of much annoyance, and in pathological cases it may actually make your drivetrain unusable. And I'm going to show it to you today. Also, welcome to Tribal Bike Tech. If you are using very heavy cassette, like for example one of those Chinese ones I reviewed recently, or are using very draggy hub, for example one that's new and hasn't been broken yet, then you may end up in a situation when you track chain on the chainstay. This may end up obviously with damaged finish of the bike. However, this may also end up in pathological cases with the drivetrain being completely locked, when then you need to stop and unwind everything. And I think I'm going to show you now how to make it happen on just about every bike, so you'll know what to avoid. This is a typical 1x-road drivetrain. This is a chainring, this is a cassette, this is a chain. Nothing extraordinary here. If I start pedaling, obviously the chain is gonna get pulled by the chainring, the cassette's gonna spin, and we're going forward. This is obvious, this is what we want, and this is what we get. However, what happens if I start backpedaling? Especially if I start backpedaling suddenly. Well, this happens. What did I just induced? I call it a cassette backlash. The cause for this phenomenon is very simple, and it boils down to the first Newton's law. Essentially, a cassette is a piece of metal. If you're pedaling, you are rotating it. And because it's a piece of metal, it has inertia. So, you are rotating it. Because of the first Newton's law, it wants to continue rotating, and the only thing that's stopping it is friction. However, when you're trying to backpedal, you are trying to force it to rotate in the other direction. And for a brief period of time, the only force that's going to make it to do so is the spring in the rear derailleur. Since this spring isn't infinitely rigid, you are going to slacken this chain here, and it can actually get dragged on the chainstay and get jammed here. This is infuriating in many cases, and it is why I call it a cassette backlash, because it's a cassette not wanting to do what you want to do. Another example. This is my mountain bike. This is my ZTTO 11-50 11-speed cassette, which is 670 grams of Chinese engineering. I'm rotating the drivetrain on a low gear, and nothing interesting happens. If I stop pedaling, nothing interesting happens. However, let's simulate going fairly fast downhill. Here I am on my top gear, going fast, and then there is a problem, so I stop pedaling, and you can see that the chain on the drive side is slackened. You can see how the chainstay protector here has been scarred from this chain dragging on it. However, I have cheated here a bit, because I have disengaged the clutch. And this is what happens in this example when clutch is engaged. I'm going very fast. Oh my god, there is an obstacle, I need to stop pedaling, and you can see that the problem is still there, but it's much less problematic, so to speak. So what makes this appear as a problem? Well, usually a combination of several factors. Let's start with riding on high gears of the cassette. When you backpedal on a small cog, you are trying to force the fastest reversal of the cassette rotation. Additionally, you are using the smallest cogs when going fast, so the cassette is rotating the fastest. Essentially, you want to cause the fast reversal of a fast rotating object, and that's a problem. 11-tooth cogs are pretty bad in this regard. The new and improved 10 and 9-tooth cogs, I shudder to think what can happen. A draggy rear hub. Friction and drag caused by the free hub are one of those things that cause the cassette to keep rotating in a given direction. Obviously, when you try to reverse the rotation of the cassette against the backlash, you're going to work against it. The more friction and drag you have, the more problems you have with it. I heard through the grapevine that the old Industry 9 hubs, pre-Torch, their current offering, were particularly prone to this. On the other hand, the new XTR Silence hubs are shaping to be excellent in this regard, because their clutch, the ratchet mechanism, completely disengages when backpedaling or coasting, so no friction to deal with. Long derailleur cages. The longer the cage of the derailleur, the less tension there is on the return side of the drivetrain, which means there is a less resistance to what causes the slackening of the drive side of the drivetrain when you backpedal. The longer the cage, the less tension there is, so you want to have as short cage as possible. And lastly, derailleurs without a clutch. The clutch mechanism is a very effective remedy for this problem, because it naturally resists what causes it. If you have a derailleur without a clutch, you will have to deal with it one way or another, at least in some very pathological cases, especially if you want to make a 1x-mountain drivetrain with those massive cassettes, and you want to use a derailleur without a clutch. So how to deal with this problem? Well, obviously you want to be doing something that's opposite to what makes it happen. However, I presume that you don't want to limit your gearing choices, so not riding on high gears is not an option. So what are technical solutions? Well, first of all, try to determine whether you can buy a clutched mech for your bike. They aren't available in every shifting system there is, but for most they are. At least they are getting there. And that is the most effective solution. If that's not an option or didn't help you, make sure that your rear hub is clean and lubed. If that didn't help, replace it with one that's, well, less draggy. If that didn't help or is not an option, try to get a derailleur with a shorter cage or higher cage tension or cage spring tension. If you can get a mech with a really short cage, the shortest you can get away with, this usually should help. And the last resort, because obviously it is most expensive, get a lighter cassette. The lighter the cassette, the less probability there is that this issue is going to happen. There is a video on this channel where I show how I managed to get a Tiagra 4700 to shift an 1142 cassette. Cool, right? Well, not really, because that cassette was almost 550 grams of Chinese engineering. Tiagra 4700 has a fairly long cage and it doesn't have a clutch. To make it worse, the hub I was using was a fairly new Saint hub, so it was quite draggy. Riding that bike on the fastest gears was almost impossible, because each time I stopped pedaling, the spinning metal of the cassette would continue on its merry way, and that was mightily annoying. I actually solved this problem by selling the cassette and replacing it with one that tops at the 28 cog. That's because it turned out I don't need all that range. However, if I was persistent trying to fix the issue and keep the cassette, I think it would get costly really fast. I hope I shed some light on this issue, as I think it's quite an interesting problem to ponder. For example, have you ever wondered, okay, you haven't wondered, you're not insane. I wonder, for example, why SRAM hasn't yet trickled down the 10-tooth cog, which is the cherry on top of the 1x groups, to the lower ones. And the reason might be that lower end group usually means higher weight. And higher weight, along with 10-tooth cog, make this problem insufferable even with a clutch derailleur. Is that the case? I don't know, but it might be.